This happened about 2 years ago, in the summer of 2023. I was 24, working as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm in downtown Portland. One of those places where everyone's overworked and underpaid, but you stick around for the resume. The hours were brutal. This happened about 2 years ago, in the summer of 2023. I was 24, working as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm in downtown Portland. One of those places where everyone's overworked and underpaid, but you stick around for the resume. The hours were brutal. I'd routinely be there until 9 or 10 at night. My apartment was about a 20-minute walk from work. Nothing special, just a one-bedroom on the second floor of this older building from the 50s. The building showed its age: worn carpet, faded wallpaper, an elevator that made concerning noises. Most people took the stairs. But the apartment had charm. High ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked, huge windows. The bedroom had this massive walk-in closet with a sliding door on a track. The only problem was the door never closed all the way. The track was warped. There was always a gap, maybe 2 or 3 inches. I tried fixing it multiple times. New rollers, adjusting the track, YouTube tutorials. Nothing worked. Eventually, I just accepted it. My routine was predictable. I'd leave for work around 8 in the morning, get home around 7 or 8 at night, make something quick for dinner, usually pasta or a sandwich. Then I'd spend the rest of the night on my laptop, either finishing work projects or just scrolling. I'm a night owl, always have been. I'd regularly stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, the laptop screen often the only light in the apartment. I'd been living there about 8 months when things started feeling off. Small things at first. I'd come home and my desk lamp would be on when I was certain I'd turned it off that morning. I had this whole ritual of checking lights before I left, partly to save on the electric bill, partly because I was paranoid about fires. But there that lamp would be, glowing when I walked in. The first few times I convinced myself I had just forgotten. I was tired, stressed, working long hours. Of course I'd forget a light switch. But it kept happening. 2 or 3 times a week I'd come home to find it on. Then I started noticing doors. The bathroom door specifically. I'm particular about keeping doors closed. I'd leave with it closed and come home to find it wide open. The kitchen chairs bothered me too. I had this small table with 2 chairs, and I always kept them pushed in neatly, but I'd come home and find one pulled out at an angle like someone had just gotten up from sitting there. Sometimes the chair would be turned around, facing the window. But then the food situation started. I'm really particular about organization. Everything has its place. I'd do my grocery shopping every Saturday morning, buy a whole week's worth of food, put everything away in very specific spots. Canned goods arranged by type, labels facing forward, cereal boxes lined up by size. But things kept moving. The peanut butter would be in the wrong cabinet. A bag of chips I'd clipped shut would be open on the counter. My milk disappeared way faster than it should have. I don't drink much milk, usually just a splash in coffee. A half-gallon would normally last over a week, but I'd buy one on Saturday and by Wednesday would be almost empty. That's when I started keeping obsessive mental notes. One night before bed, around 1:30 in the morning, I deliberately arranged my pantry in a very specific way. I took 3 cans of tomato soup and placed them in a perfect row on the middle shelf, labels facing forward, evenly spaced. I even took a photo on my phone. The next morning, I checked. 2 of those soup cans had been turned around, labels facing the back. The 3rd can was gone from that shelf entirely. I found it 3 shelves down, lying on its side. My heart started pounding. This wasn't me forgetting. Someone had moved those cans. Someone had been in my apartment, touching my things. Real fear settled in then. I started triple-checking my locks every night, testing the deadbolt multiple times, checking every window, peering into my closet before bed with my phone's flashlight. About 3 weeks into this, I was working late one Tuesday night. Around midnight, sitting at my desk in the living room and trying to finish this logo design that was due the next morning. My client had sent their fourth round of revisions that afternoon, completely changing the color scheme again. I was exhausted, eyes burning from the screen. That's when I heard it. A cough. Soft, muffled, but unmistakable. It came from my bedroom. I froze completely. The sound had been brief, less than a second, but I definitely heard it. I held my breath, listening so hard I could hear my own heartbeat. Nothing. Just silence. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was from another apartment. I tried to convince myself, but my concentration was shattered. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, every little sound making me jump. Finally, I forced myself to check. I walked to the bedroom slowly. The door was partially open like I always left it. I flipped on the light. The room looked exactly as I'd left it. Bed unmade, clothes on the chair, and everything normal. Then I noticed the closet door. It was open wider than usual. Not the normal 2 or 3 inch gap, but pulled back a solid 8 or 10 inches, wide enough that I could see into the dark interior. I approached slowly and reached for the handle to close it. As I grabbed it, I heard it again, that cough, inside the closet, right behind the door I was touching. Everything in me screamed to run, but I couldn't move. Then the door moved, pulled from inside, and I saw fingers. Someone's fingers wrapped around the edge of the door. I screamed and stumbled backward, falling hard. The door slid fully open and a man emerged. He was tall, thin, wearing a grimy t-shirt and jeans that looked unwashed for weeks, greasy hair hanging around his face. His eyes were wild, jittery. He didn't attack, just stood there swaying, looking down at me with this confused expression. He opened his mouth to say something, and that's when I finally moved. I scrambled up and ran. Didn't grab my phone, my keys, anything. Just bolted out my front door. Ran barefoot down the hall, down the stairs. Didn't stop until I was outside on the street. A neighbor coming home saw me and called the police. The police arrived within minutes. They searched my apartment, but he was gone. Left through the bedroom window, down the fire escape. But they found evidence. A sleeping bag in the back of my closet behind my clothes. Empty food containers, some of my things he'd been using. My toothbrush, a hairbrush, some clothes. The detective said I was lucky. She used a term I'd never heard, frogging, when someone secretly lives in another person's home. They never caught him. Despite footage from the building, he was never identified. Probably transient, the detective said. I moved out 2 weeks later. Couldn't even go back to pack without panic attacks. My parents did it while I waited in my car. I don't know how long he was there. Could have been weeks, could have been months. I'm in a new place now. Secured building, 8th floor. I check every closet, every cabinet, under every bed before I can relax. Every single night. My friends think I'm paranoid, but I know what it's like to discover you weren't alone when you thought you were. I thought that was the worst kind of invasion. Someone living inside your home, inside your private space, watching you when you thought you were safe. I was wrong. This happened when I was 19 in December of 2021, home from college for winter break. My parents had moved to a new house while I was away at school, so this was my first time seeing it. They'd found this place in a suburban development about 40 minutes outside the city, one of those newer neighborhoods where every house looks almost identical. The house was nice, definitely an upgrade. 3 levels, main floor with living room, kitchen, my parents' bedroom. Upstairs had 2 bedrooms. My younger brother claimed 1, so I got the basement room. My dad had spent months finishing the basement himself, installed drywall, painted it blue-gray, put in new carpet, recessed lighting. He had his workshop along one wall, a laundry room, and at the far end, my bedroom with its own bathroom. I got there Friday afternoon, December 17th. We spent the evening catching up. But Saturday morning, my parents had to leave for a wedding out of state. My brother went too, and that meant I had the house to myself for the weekend. Saturday was great. Slept until noon, made a huge breakfast, spent the afternoon binge-watching shows, ordered pizza for dinner. Around 10 that night, I headed down to my room. At the bottom of the basement stairs was a small storage room tucked under the stairs where our parents kept Christmas decorations. The door was standing open, just cracked a few inches. I was pretty sure it had been closed earlier. I opened it with my phone's flashlight. Just boxes. I closed it firmly, heard it latch, went to my room. I was in bed with my laptop when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps above me. They started near the kitchen, moved through the living room, stopped near the hallway. My parents wouldn't be back until late Sunday, 4 hours away. I checked my phone. No calls, no texts. The footsteps started again. I decided to check. Got out of bed. The basement was bright with all the lights on. That storage room door was open again, wide open. I'd closed it. I'd heard it latch. I approached slowly. The boxes inside had been moved, some pulled forward, creating a gap in the back, big enough for someone to stand in. Then I heard the footsteps again, but not upstairs, in the basement. Heavy steps coming from near the laundry room. I spun around, but nobody was there, but I could still hear them, coming from inside the walls. I ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, reached the main floor and slammed the basement door, fumbling with the deadbolt. My hand shook so bad I could barely turn it. I called my dad. He answered, cheerful voice over music and conversation. I asked about the house, if someone could be in the walls. What? Why? I'm hearing noises, like footsteps in the walls. Pause. There's a panel in the basement, back corner of my workshop near the floor, same color as the walls, leads to a crawl space under part of the house. The contractor might have left unsecured. My blood went cold. If someone got into that crawl space, they could move around, maybe into the walls. Get out right now. Don't pack anything. Get to a neighbor's and call 911. We're leaving, but we're 4 hours away. I was already out the door. Ran to the neighbors in just socks. They called the police. The police searched everything, found evidence, disturbed insulation in the crawl space, footprints in the dust, food wrappers, a blanket. But whoever it was had fled through an external access to the crawl space. Theory was someone had been squatting there, possibly since before my parents moved in. The contractor was investigated. One of his workers had a criminal record and stopped showing up to work. They suspected him, but never found him. My parents sealed everything, installed a full security system, but I never stayed there alone again. About 3 months later, I was back for spring break. My whole family was home. Around midnight, I was in my room when I heard it again. Footsteps in the walls. I got my dad. We went down together. That panel had sealed with screws. Some of the screws were missing. And we called the police. They searched, but found nothing. But those screws had definitely been removed. We moved the following month. In the first house, the threat was already inside. In this one, it was trying to get in. This happened in late October of 2022. I was 22, living in my first apartment by myself in downtown Seattle. Small studio in this older building from the 20s. I was working as a junior accountant at a firm 4 blocks away. It was a Wednesday night, October 26th. Got home around 6:30, made dinner, spent the evening on work paperwork. By 11, I was ready for bed. I checked that the front door was locked. I always checked twice, a habit from a friend who'd had her place broken into. Got in bed and turned off the light. Was just drifting off when I heard it. A knock. 3 distinct taps on my door. Quiet, polite,
but deliberate. I listened. The building was silent. Then it came again. 3 more knocks. I got to the door, looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No one there. Confused, I went back to bed. 10 minutes later, knocking again. I looked through the peephole. Hallway empty again. This time, I didn't go back to bed. I pressed my ear against the door. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Quiet, measured breathing right on the other side. "Who's there?" I called out. No response, just that breathing. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The operator answered. "There's someone outside my apartment door. They keep knocking, but when I look, no one's there. But I can hear them breathing." "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Is your door locked?" "Yes, locked with a chain." "I'm dispatching officers. Don't open the door." Then the knocking started again, but different. Hard, aggressive pounding that made my whole door shake. They were trying to get in. I was frozen, staring at the door shuddering, the chain rattling, the deadbolt holding but the frame creaking. Then it stopped. Complete silence. "He stopped," I whispered. "Officers are in the building now." I heard voices in the hall. Then a knock. "Police, ma'am, are you all right?" I unlocked everything. "We know, we saw him. He ran when he heard us." They came in, took my statement, asked if I knew anyone who might want to scare me. I couldn't think of anyone. They never caught him, but when the officers were leaving, one mentioned something. They'd found marks on my door, around the lock. Fresh scratches. Tool marks.
"Looks like he was working on it while he was knocking, trying to distract you while he picked the lock. You did the right thing not opening that door." I had a locksmith come the next morning, installed high-security locks, got a security camera for my door. About a month later, I saw a news story. Man arrested for assaulting a woman in her apartment in my neighborhood, 4 blocks away. He'd knocked on her door late at night, and when she opened it, forced his way inside. The article included his mugshot. Tall, thin, 30s, unremarkable features. Could have been the person outside my door. I emailed it to the detective. He asked if I'd look at a lineup. I said yes, but it never happened. The man took a deal, was sentenced before I could identify him. I don't know if it was him. I'll never know. But sometimes late at night I think about those knocks. 3 polite taps, then pounding. I think about him working on my lock, knowing I was right there. Just when I thought I'd seen the worst kind of home invasion, this happened.
This was in March of 2024. I was 26, living alone in a duplex on the east side of Austin, Texas. Not quite the suburbs, not quite the city. One of those in-between neighborhoods where houses sit close together, but everyone keeps to themselves. My place was the left half of an older duplex that had been split sometime in the 80s. Thin walls, shared attic space, separate entrances. I worked remotely as a content writer for a tech company, which meant I was home most of the time. My setup was simple. Laptop at the dining room table that doubled as my desk, coffee always brewing, sweatpants most days. The duplex had 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, 1 bathroom. The second bedroom I used as storage, mostly boxes I still hadn't unpacked from my move 6 months earlier. The person on the other side of the duplex was quiet. I'd see her occasionally, a woman probably in her 50s leaving for work in scrubs around 6 in the morning. We'd exchanged polite hellos a few times, but never had an actual conversation. I didn't even know her name. The landlord had mentioned when I signed a lease that the walls were thin, that I might hear her TV or footsteps occasionally. He wasn't wrong. I could hear her moving around sometimes, muffled sounds of daily life. It never bothered me.
What did bother me was how dark it got at night. The street had maybe 3 working streetlights for the entire block, and my duplex sat toward the end where the last one had been out for months. The landlord kept saying the city would fix it. They hadn't. So when I'd take my trash out after dark or come home late from the rare times I went out, I'd be walking up to a completely dark house. I'm not usually a paranoid person, never have been. I'd lived alone before without issue, but something about that duplex started getting to me about 2 months after I moved in. Nothing dramatic, just small things that felt slightly off. It started with the windows. I'd wake up some mornings and the kitchen window would be unlocked. Just the latch flipped up, still closed but not secured. I'd specifically remember locking it the night before because I always did my rounds before bed. Check the front door, back door, kitchen window, bathroom window. Same routine every night. The first time it happened, I figured I'd just forgotten. The second time, I made a mental note to be more careful. The third time, I started testing the latch before I went to bed, physically trying to lift the window to make sure it was locked. And yet, I'd still wake up to find it unlocked. I mentioned it to my neighbor one morning when we happened to be getting our mail at the same time. Asked if she'd noticed anything weird, if maybe someone had been around the property. She gave me this look, not unfriendly, but not particularly concerned either. Said she worked nights, so she wasn't around much to notice anything. That was pretty much the extent of our conversation. Then the sounds started. At first, I thought it was just her, my neighbor, moving around on her side. But the sounds were wrong. They'd happen at 3 or 4 in the morning when her car wasn't in the driveway, when I knew she was at work. Footsteps. Not loud, not stomping, just soft creaking sounds like someone walking slowly across a floor. I'd lie in bed, listening, trying to convince myself it was the house settling or maybe an animal in the attic. Old houses made noise, that's what they did. But the footsteps had a rhythm to them, a deliberate pace that didn't match random settling sounds. One night, around 2 in the morning, I was up late finishing a project on a tight deadline. I was sitting at my dining room table, the only light on in the house, when I heard it clearly. Footsteps directly above me, in the attic. Slow and measured, moving from one end toward the other, then stopping. I sat there, frozen, staring at the ceiling. The attic access was a small hatch in the hallway ceiling, the kind you'd need a ladder to reach. I'd never been up there, never had any reason to. My lease didn't include attic storage.
The footsteps started again. Same slow pace, moving back the other direction. I grabbed my phone, pulled up my neighbor's number that the landlord had given me for emergencies, but then I hesitated. What was I going to say? That I heard footsteps in the attic? She'd probably tell me the same thing I had been telling myself. Old house, settling sounds, maybe animals. I sat there for another 20 minutes, listening. The footsteps stopped. Everything went quiet. Eventually, I convinced myself I was being ridiculous and went to bed. The next morning, I found something that made my stomach drop. The attic hatch was open. Not all the way, just a few inches, like someone had pushed it up and then not quite closed it properly when they came back down. I stared at it for a long time. That hatch had definitely been closed the night before. I would have noticed if it was open. It was right in the hallway. I walked past it multiple times a day. I called my landlord. He sounded annoyed, like I was bothering him about something trivial. Asked if maybe the latch should just come loose, if maybe it opened on its own. I told him no, that wasn't possible. The hatch had been firmly closed. He said he'd come by later that week to check it out. He didn't seem like he believed me. That afternoon, I went to a hardware store and bought a small ladder, one of those folding ones. When I got home, I set it up under the attic hatch, took a deep breath, and pushed the hatch fully open. The smell hit me immediately. Musty, stale air that hadn't been disturbed in a long time.
I climbed up a few rungs and poked my head through the opening, using my phone's flashlight to look around. The attic ran the length of both duplex units, just one long space divided by a partial wall that didn't reach the ceiling. You could technically crawl from one side to the other over the dividing wall if you wanted to. The space was mostly empty. Some old insulation, exposed beams, dust everywhere. Nothing that shouldn't be there. I was about to climb back down when my light caught something in the far corner on my neighbor's side. A blanket. Dark-colored, folded up neatly and placed on top of the insulation. Next to it were a few water bottles. Empty ones. My hands started shaking. I climbed down so fast I almost fell, practically jumping off the last few rungs. I closed the hatch and stood there in my hallway trying to breathe normally. Someone had been in the attic. Someone had been in the attic, and based on those water bottles, they'd been up there more than once. I called the landlord again. This time, I didn't ask politely. I told him someone had been in the attic, that there was evidence, that I needed him to come over immediately. He must have heard something in my voice because he said he'd be there within an hour. He showed up 45 minutes later with another guy, someone he introduced as his maintenance person. They both went up into the attic with flashlights. I waited downstairs, pacing my living room, checking the front door lock for the 5th time. When they came down, the landlord's face was different, more serious. He'd found the blanket and bottles, also found some food wrappers, granola bar wrappers, empty chip bags, all shoved into a corner. The maintenance guy was already on the phone with someone I couldn't hear.
Did he notice anything else unusual? The landlord asked me. Anything missing? Anyone around the property? I told him about the window latch, about the footsteps I'd been hearing. He listened, nodding, then asked if my neighbor had mentioned anything similar. I said I didn't know, that we barely talked. He went over and knocked on her door. No answer. Her car wasn't there. He tried calling her, left a voicemail asking her to call back urgently about a security issue. The police came about 30 minutes later. 2 officers who took statements went up into the attic themselves, took photos. They asked the same questions the landlord had. Had I seen anyone suspicious? Had anything been stolen? Did I feel unsafe? I told them I did feel unsafe, very unsafe. They said they'd file a report, that they'd increase patrols in the area, but that without evidence of forced entry or theft, there wasn't much they could actively investigate. Technically, the attic was part of the property. If someone had accessed it, they'd need to figure out how. The landlord had the maintenance guy install a lock on the attic hatch that same day, a padlock that required a key. He gave me 1 key, kept one himself, said he'd give one to my neighbor when she got home. He also said he'd have someone check all the windows and doors, make sure everything was secure. For the first time in weeks, I felt stupid for being scared. The attic was locked. The windows were secure. I thought maybe that was it. But here's the thing that kept eating at me. The kitchen window, that latch that kept being unlocked. I'd been assuming I was forgetting to lock it, that I was being careless. But what if I wasn't? What if someone had been unlocking it from the inside? What if they'd been coming down from the attic, through my hallway, into my kitchen, unlocking the window, then going back up before I woke up? The thought made me feel sick. How many nights had someone been in my house while I slept? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with every light in the house on, my phone in my hand, listening to every sound. The house was never quiet, I realized. It creaked and groaned constantly. Pipes made noises. The refrigerator hummed and clicked. But underneath all that, I swore I could hear something else. Soft sounds, and might have been footsteps, or might have been my imagination. Around 4 in the morning, I heard my neighbor's car pull into her driveway. I heard her front door open and close. For a moment, I considered going over there, asking if she'd heard anything, if she knew anything. But it was 4 in the morning. I'd sound crazy. I must have dozed off on the couch at some point because I woke up to sunlight coming through the windows and my phone ringing. It was the landlord. He'd spoken to my neighbor. She'd been hearing things too. Footsteps, sounds in the walls. She'd mentioned it to him months ago, but he'd dismissed it as house noise. He said he was having someone come inspect the entire attic space, check for any other access points, any way someone could be getting in from outside. In the meantime, he suggested I might want to stay somewhere else for a few days, just until they figured out what was going on. I told them I'd think about it, but I didn't have anywhere to go. My family lived in another state, my friends in Austin all had roommates or small places. I couldn't just impose for an indefinite period. That day I went through my entire duplex with an obsessive detail. I checked every window, every door, every vent, every possible entry point. Everything was secure. The new lock on the attic hatch was in place. There was no way someone could get in. But that night, around midnight, I heard them again. Footsteps, soft but unmistakable. And they weren't in the attic this time. They were in my living room. I was in my bedroom with the door closed. I'd been reading, trying to distract myself, when I heard the first creak of the floorboard, that specific board near the couch that always creaked when you stepped on it. I stopped breathing, just sat there in my bed, book open in my lap, listening. Another creak, closer to the hallway now. Someone was moving through my living room, toward the bedrooms. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it slowly, quietly, and dialed 911. The operator answered, and I whispered that someone was in my house, that I could hear them, that I was locked in my bedroom. "Can you confirm your address?" she asked. I gave it to her, still whispering. "I'm dispatching officers now. Stay where you are, keep the door locked, stay on the line with me." The footsteps had stopped. Everything went silent. I sat there holding my phone, staring at my bedroom door, waiting for the handle to turn, waiting for someone to try to come in. Minutes passed. 5, maybe 10. The silence was worse than the footsteps had been. Then I heard my front door open. Not break open, not forced. It opened normally, like someone was using a key. I heard voices. "Police. Anyone here?" I unlocked my bedroom door and came out. 2 officers were standing in my living room, flashlights out even though my lights were on. They did a sweep of the entire duplex, checked the closets, the bathroom, the second... I was in my bedroom with the door closed. I'd been reading, trying to distract myself, when I heard the first creak of the floorboard, that specific board near the couch that always creaked when you stepped on it. I stopped breathing, just sat there in my bed, book open in my lap, listening. Another creak, closer to the hallway now. Someone was moving through my living room, toward the bedrooms. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it slowly, quietly, and dialed 911. The operator answered, and I whispered that someone was in my house, that I could hear them, that I was locked in my bedroom. "Can you confirm your address?" she asked. I gave it to her, still whispering. "I'm dispatching officers now. Stay where you are, keep the door locked, stay on the line with me." The footsteps had stopped. Everything went silent. I sat there holding my phone, staring at my bedroom door, waiting for the handle to turn, waiting for someone to try to come in. Minutes passed. 5, maybe 10. The silence was worse than the footsteps had been. Then I heard my front door open. Not break open, not forced. It opened normally, like someone was using a key. I heard voices. "Police. Anyone here?" I unlocked my bedroom door and came out. 2 officers were standing in my living room, flashlights out even though my lights were on. They did a sweep of the entire duplex, checked the closets, the bathroom, the second bedroom, the kitchen. Nothing. No one. They checked the attic hatch, still locked. They checked all the windows and doors, all secure. One of the officers asked if I'd been drinking, if I'd taken any medication. I said no. He asked if I lived alone, if I'd been under a lot of stress lately. I knew where this was going. I showed them my phone, showed them my call history, all the times I'd called the landlord and the police over the past few weeks.
I told them about the stuff in the attic, about the window latch, about everything. They listened politely, but I could see they thought I was being paranoid. One of them suggested I might want to get a security system, some cameras. The other suggested I might want to talk to someone, maybe a therapist, about stress and anxiety. They left after telling me to call if I heard anything else. I stood in my living room after they left, looking at the floor, at that board near the couch that creaked. I walked over to it and stepped on it deliberately. It creaked. Same sound I'd heard earlier. I wasn't imagining things. Someone had been in here. I grabbed my laptop and started researching security cameras. Found some cheap ones I could set up myself. Ordered them for next day delivery. Then I dragged my mattress in the living room and slept there. Or tried to sleep, with my back against the front door. The cameras arrived the next afternoon. I set up 3 of them. One pointed at the front door, one at the hallway where you could see both bedroom doors and the attic hatch, one in the kitchen pointed at the window. That night I sat in my living room watching the camera feeds on my phone. Every camera showed empty rooms. Nothing moving, just still, quiet spaces. Around 2 in the morning, I dozed off. I woke up to my phone buzzing. Motion detected in the hallway. I pulled up the camera feed with shaking hands. The attic hatch was open. Not all the way, just a few inches like before. The padlock was still on it, still locked, but the hatch itself was pushed up from inside. As I watched, it pushed up further. Then a hand came through the gap, pale fingers gripping the edge of the opening. I couldn't move. I sat there staring at my phone screen, watching as someone pulled themselves up through the impossible gap, squeezing through an opening that shouldn't have fit a person. They dropped down into my hallway silently. The camera angle didn't show their face, just their body. They were wearing dark clothes, thin build, moving slowly and deliberately. They stood there for a moment. Then they turned and looked directly at the camera. I screamed. The figure moved fast, reaching up and pulling the camera down. The feed went black. I was already running for my front door, fumbling with the locks. I got outside, barefoot in my pajamas, and ran to my neighbor's door, pounding on it. She answered, looking alarmed. I was incoherent, trying to explain, pointing at my door. She grabbed her phone and called 911, while I stood there shaking. The police came again. This time they brought more units. They went into my duplex with weapons drawn, cleared every room, checked the attic again. They found the camera in the hallway on the floor, cord pulled out, but the attic hatch was closed and locked again. The lock hadn't been tampered with. There was no one inside. But they did find something. In my kitchen, the window latch was unlocked again, and underneath the window outside, there were footprints in the dirt, fresh ones, leading away from the house toward the back alley. They checked her neighbor's side, too. Her attic hatch had been forced open from inside at some point. The wood around it splintered. She'd never noticed because she worked nights, was rarely home. The working theory was that someone had been accessing the attic through her side, moving between both units through the crawl space, coming down into my place when they knew I was asleep or out. They'd been doing it for weeks, maybe months. But the padlock, the police said, that was new. They couldn't explain how someone had opened the hatch from inside while it was locked on the outside. Unless there had been someone up there before the lock was installed and they'd just never left. The landlord broke the lease that week, said I could move out immediately without penalty. My neighbor did the same. Neither of us wanted to stay. I stayed with a coworker for a month while I found a new place. During that month, I kept checking the camera footage I'd saved from that night, watching that figure squeeze through the impossible gap, watching them look at the camera. I never saw their face. The angle was wrong. but I could see their hands, their build, the way they moved. And I could see that they knew where the camera was, knew I was watching, and they looked right at it anyway. I'm in a new apartment now, ground floor, security building, cameras in every hallway. I still check my locks obsessively. I still wake up at night sometimes, convinced I heard footsteps. The duplex was eventually demolished. The landlord sold the property, and the new owners tore both units down to build something new. I drove by once to see. Just an empty lot now, chain-link fence around it. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone, I think about that hand coming through the attic hatch, about how many nights someone was up there, listening to me, watching me, waiting. I still check the ceilings before I check the doors.